Saroj Lal was one of Scotland's pioneering race relations activists, feminists and equality campaigners. She was also a trailblazer in multicultural education, fighting for fairness for all, and in particular for our BAME communities. Her experience in teaching was key to her later work in multiculturalism and anti-racist education. She went on to challenge perceptions and stereotypes throughout her career, firstly as a community worker with the YWCA, and then for 16 years with the Lothian Racial Equality Council, becoming its director in 1990.
So it's incredibly, tomorrow it'll be half a century, 50 years since my mum started her journey, her professional journey in Scotland. She'd arrived in Edinburgh towards the end of the 1960s. She then went on to train as a teacher. In the August of 1970, she was then appointed as a teacher at South Morningside Primary School. I think it was daunting because it was groundbreaking. She was a newcomer in Scotland. She really wasn't that familiar with the country and its culture. So it's quite admirable that she not only went through the process of learning to be a teacher, but also then went into a school where she was the only coloured face. Her classes were almost exclusively white. She taught 2 classes, and across 60 to 70 children, there was only one South Asian pupil. She was no pussycat, she wasn't a walkover. She was a force to be reckoned with. But at the same time, she was extremely good at managing people and finding a diplomatic solution to challenges. She was a pioneer. She started the first group, it was called the Asian Cultural Girls Club at Drumland Community High School, in order to give every week the opportunity for parents to feel secure that they were letting their girls out into a safe environment. She had a plan in order to make things better. And if you ask some of the community leaders today within the Sikh community, they will acknowledge that had it not been for Saroj, a lot of them wouldn't have gone on to find professional careers in all walks of life. So that was a big thing. When I've been talking to former pupils in her class, they all begin by talking about how she looked, the fact that she wore her sari to work. A sari is not the easiest thing to do a day's work in the primary school, and it really isn't. But the sari was a thing that she viewed as being her identity, and I think she deliberately wore the sari. I think it gave her confidence in the classroom that she was who she was. Look, here I am, take me as you find me. But it also normalized her dress in the minds of her class. And when you speak to her former pupils, it's mentioned, but not in any tokenistic or exotic way. It's mentioned because they viewed it as part of her personality. There was Saroj. What sari is she wearing today? Now let's just get on with the class, if you see what I mean.
It causes me great anxiety to think that some of our teachers are still feeling that, will I be accepted? Or will that have an impact on the way young people or parents or my fellow colleagues will view me? Does it put a question over my ability and my competency as a teacher? So those conversations, Vinny, are occurring today, where colleagues are either removing. I know a colleague who removed her hijab so that she could try to secure a promoted post. So essentially losing that aspect of her identity or subsuming elements of it so that she could perhaps progress and fit in, perhaps. So it's interesting that, all those years ago, your mum was very brave and actually went in wearing her sari quite confidently, whereas actually at this stage we've got teachers questioning whether markers of their own identity have a place.
I remember being told, South Morningside Primary, is one of the more progressive schools in Edinburgh. So I think your mum's legacy, because looking back now, because I talked about that time of the 70s being a real assimilationist kind of period where you had to fit in. You didn't fit in whoever you were. So the fact that the South Morningside, I guess, all credit to the head teacher then, did not say to your mum, please can you just wear what would have been her normal clothes, was a credit to them as well. The legacy of South Morningside being known a good several decades after that they were an inclusive, accepting school, forward-thinking, progressive, I rather suspect came from the fact that your mum was in fact there. One of the things that struck me as working in higher education is that phrase decolonizing the curriculum is one that actually a lot of disciplines talk about, but within teacher education is almost silent. It's not a term that's discussed with students. It's not to say that individual lecturers are not changing their curriculum, but I think it starts from initial teacher education. Because if we're not training and educating the next generation of teachers to think differently, then what you will have is a reproduction of the same. So what you're having is this fascination with Mary Queen of Scots and Vikings. This is the same pattern that's occurring with every generation.
You just have to, again, I think maybe count, I don't know, Rowena, maybe we can maybe count, again on fingers of one hand, how many BME teacher educators we have in Scotland. So again, it's back to that diverse representation and encouraging our teacher educators to think about their own identity, how that impacts on their day-to-day interactions with their students, but also whether they are developing their own understanding of race, racism and whiteness, and how they're having those conversations with their students. Young people are just a wonderful community, because back to Saroj wearing her sari, I had a similar incident when I went into a school to observe my student teacher, and a young, I think it was a 5-year-old, primary 1 boy came up very clearly and said, "Do you have hair under your hijab?" And I said, "Yes, I do. Would you like to see it?" And he said, yes, please. But I asked him, I said, "You need to go away and do your work first, and when you're finished, come and look for me." I thought he would forget, but he didn't. So he did look me out, and he said, "Right, I'm ready to see your hair now." Now, it depended on my reaction, I guess, to that. I could have said, "That's not a good question to ask," or, "You shouldn't be asking me this question." So I said, "Well, yeah, but I'll need your help." So I asked him to put his hand out, started to take out my pins. I said, "Now be careful," unravelled the scarf, and he started to touch my hair and make comment. I made him promise not to say anything about my grey hair. But eventually he said, "Right, you can put it back on now." And he helped me put it back on, because I don't have a mirror in front of me. And I actually reflected on that, and I thought, I'm pretty certain that young person now will go through their life, that the next time they see a woman wearing a hijab or somebody who looks like me, might even challenge some of their friends if they were to make a comment. So subtle, markers, those subtle ways that we work with our young people. So that representation is really important to have.
Other than what Khadija has said about the courage for being teachers to be who you are, because my God, if Saroj could do it in late 1960s, people in 2020 should not be questioning what they wear to go to school. Absolutely should not. And actually, they should be told, listen, this woman was doing this in the late 60s. What are you doing even questioning it at this time? I think that's a legacy. The other is the importance of working with families and BAME communities and reaching out, because one thing my mother did do, and we haven't talked about this today, is she always bridged, and she became somebody who I think a lot of community members went to ask for advice about education issues, about schooling issues, about curriculum issues. And I think schools need to be doing that much more, reaching out to BAME communities and families, seeing them as a resource, but also making sure that they are part of the school community. That's a legacy. And the final thing, which I think for me is most powerful, is the fact that she mainstreamed, embedded race issues into whatever she taught. So whether that be geography, as you just mentioned, or history, or whatever, these are things that you don't just leave to one tiny bit of the curriculum. You just do it in every single subject area. And that, I think, is something that we should take forward.
On the 20th of August 2020, pupils, teachers and former colleagues joined Saroj's family at South Morningside Primary School to commemorate the 50th anniversary of her enduring legacy. The students had prepared a wonderful presentation on Saroj's life, the highlights of her career, her role in both education and race relations, and the challenges she faced.